Hey, what's up guys, it's DarkArmedDuelist, and today I'm going to be doing a Tenyi deck profile. So I'm really excited for this one because this deck probably just became one of the most budget decks in the entire history of Yu-Gi-Oh! Alongside with stuff like For Hire, because everything just got reprinted for this deck inside of the Megatens, which is really cool. All the Tenyi monsters were commons, and these were secret rares. The Link monsters were secret rares, except for like Berserker and Monk were commons. So like everything was common. So the entire core is probably around like $5 to get. So it's ridiculous budget, and it's a super fun deck to play around with. So without further ado guys, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit that bell on there so you can become part of the notification squad, and definitely check out the Patreon down in the description below because we have some awesome rewards for you guys, like getting your name in the description for every single video, getting a signed card sent in the mail, or even getting a requested deck profile just like this one every single month that you are a patron, along with test hands. So let's get straight on into this. So first off, we're going to be doing 3 copies of Tenyi Spirit Vashuda. Vashuda is a really good card in this deck because all of your Tenyi monsters share the same ability that if you control no effect monsters, you can special summon them from your hand. Then they have particular abilities that you can activate once per turn each. If you control a face-up non-effect monster, you can banish this card from your hand or graveyard, and then target a card your opponent controls and shuffle it or return it to the hand, which is really good just to be able to bounce something off a monster effect. We play 3 copies of Ashuna. Ashuna is pretty good too because if you control no effect monsters, you can special summon it from your hand, and if you control a face-up non-effect monster, you can banish this card from your hand or graveyard to special summon a Tenyi monster from your deck except another copy of itself, but you cannot special summon anything else but worms for the rest of the turn, which is not that big of a deal to be able to just special summon worms for the rest of the turn, because the majority of the stuff in the extra deck is a worm anyways. We play 3 copies of Shahina. This card's really good because this card is actually one of the best Tenyi monsters in the entire deck, because if a face-up non-effect monster you control is destroyed by battle or by card effects, you can banish this card from your graveyard or your hand, and then target one monster on the field that destroyed one of those destroyed monsters, special summon it, and then you can destroy a monster your opponent controls, which is again pretty good just to be able to pop cards on your opponent's side of the field. We play 1 copy of Nahita. Nahita is really good because it's kind of like a Kalut the Moon Shadow, if you will. If a face-up non-effect monster battles an opponent's monster, then you can banish this card from your hand or graveyard, and then it loses 1500 attack, or the opponent's monster loses 1500 attack, which is pretty good. 1 copy of Mapura. Mapura is pretty good too because if you control a non-effect monster, you can special summon this card from your hand, and it also has the ability when your opponent face-up monster. When your opponent targets a face-up non-effect monster you control, you can quick effect banish this card and negate the activation to destroy that card if they target a face-up non-effect monster like one of your copies of your Tenyi, like Monk or Berserker. We then play 3 copies of Adahara. Adahara is really good and it's teched into a lot of other stuff, even teched into stuff like Adamantipator, because it's a tuner level 1 monster, but it has a really neat effect that if you control a face-up non-effect monster, you can banish this card from your hand or grave, and then you can target one of your banished worm monsters and add it back to your hand, which is pretty good because all of them banish themselves to trigger an effect, which is pretty good just to be able to banish them and add them back. We play 2 copies of Mermare. Mermare is really easy to get a bunch of tokens on your side of the field because you can use its effect up to thrice per turn, which I think is the only card in the game that has that ability of thrice per turn. It's kind of a weird effect. But during your main phase, you can reduce this card's level by 1, and then you can special summon a level 1 Mermare token to your side of the field, which is pretty good. I like that ability, and it can't be special summoned except by the effect of a worm monster, which is pretty easy with Shaman. We play 3 copies of Ash Blossom for the last 3 cards of the monsters lineup, and basically this card just stops your opponent from doing stuff in their deck. It's a really good card overall to play in this deck. So that's it for the monsters, guys. Let's get into the spells. So for the spells, we're going to be playing 3 copies of Call by the Grave because it just stops your opponent, and thou shalt always play 3 Call by the Grave. Really good card in the deck because it just banishes a card out of your opponent's graveyard and negates the effect of it, which is pretty good. It stops hand traps, which is really good. We'll copy 1 for 1. All of your copies of your Tenyis are live in the graveyard, so why not play 1 for 1 in the deck? I mean, it's ridiculously good to summon Adahara from the deck and then synchro summon it away for a Berserker of the Tenyi. I mean, that card is just bonkers. We play 2 copies of Desires. Desires is really good in this deck because the Desires, basically nothing in your deck is like pivotal, so you can banish literally anything that you don't need. I mean, you don't have a particular combo piece, you're just trying to get a bunch of your monsters on your side of the field. The only thing I really don't like to banish is Vashuda, because Vashuda is just really good in the deck. And so I like to keep my Vashudas in the deck instead of banished. Everything else is kind of like, if I banish it, I still have other Tenyis, but this card's really good to just get additional plays. We then play 3 copies of the newest card, which is Heavenly Dragon Circle. This card is really interesting because it lets you tribute a worm monster and then you add a worm monster from your deck to your hand. Or if you tributed a non-effect monster to activate this effect, you can special summon it instead, but negate its effects during you negate its effects. And then during your main phase, if you control a face-up non-effect monster, you can banish this card from your graveyard to add a Tenyi monster from your deck to your hand, which is pretty good. It just adds any Tenyi card from your deck to your hand, which can be your copies of the Vassal, or it can be the Flawless Perfection of the Tenyi, or it can be your copies of your Fist of the Unrivaled Tenyi, or one of your Spirits. I mean, this card is really, really good as a 3-of, and it's just a common, too, from Rise of the Duelist. We then play 3 copies of Vassal of the Dragon Cycle. This card's really good too because it lets you send a worm from your deck to the graveyard, and then if you control a non-effect monster, then you can add from your deck to your hand 1 Tenyi monster with a different name from the monster that was sent to the graveyard. So like if I add Vashuda, I can send Adahara to be able to banish Adahara to be able to add a banished Tenyi monster from the graveyard, have 2 monsters in the hand, special summon the copy of Vashuda, summon Monk, and then summon another Tenyi from my hand that I got that was banished, and then trigger their effects in the graveyard. I mean, it's just free real estate. The entire deck is free real estate, and that's why it's such a good deck. And it's so budget now. This deck is so budget now. We then play 2 copies of Flawless Perfection of the Tenyi for the last 2 spells. All non-effect monsters on the field are unaffected by effect monsters. So all your normal vanilla monsters are unaffected by your opponent's effect monsters. I mean, that's good. That's really good. And then once per turn, if your opponent special summons an effect monster while you control a face-down monster or a non-effect monster, then you can draw 2 cards. I mean, that's really good. You get to draw 2 free cards off of this effect. I mean, that's pretty good. So that's it for the spells, guys. Let's get into the traps. So for the traps, we're playing 3 copies of Infinite Impermanence. You don't have to play Infinite Impermanence, but with Draco, or with or whatever its name is, Dragoons running around, this card's really good. And so you just stop the copy of Dragoons. But you can also play Forbidden Chalice if you want to play Chalice instead to be able to negate. I mean, if you go first, you can drop Chalice, which, I mean, usually I like to go first in this deck anyways. So this card's really nice just to be able to stop your opponents like Dragoons and stuff. It's just an overall good card. 2 copies of Waterfall of the Dragon Soul. Waterfall of the Dragon Soul lets you add a worm-type monster from your deck to your hand, or send any number of worm monsters in your hand or the graveyard to draw cards equal to the number that you discarded, plus 1. So if I send to the graveyard, like, 4, I get to draw 5, so this card actually, like, pluses you, or it doesn't plus you, it breaks even, which is still pretty good. We play 3 copies of Fist of the Unrivaled Tenyi, which is one of the most insane counter traps in the entire game. What this card does is, when a spell trap or monster effect is activated while you control a face-up non-effect monster, you can negate the activation. And if this set card is destroyed, then you get to special summon a non-effect monster from your extra deck, which is the most powerful, the one, the only Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon. I mean, yeah, you could summon Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon if this card gets destroyed. I mean, that's kind of crazy. You could summon a 4500 Beat Stick that's an OG Blue Eyes Ultimate. I mean, how much cooler can this deck get? I mean, and this card is not expensive. You can get a Blue Eyes Ultimate for like dirt cheap. I mean, nobody plays Blue Eyes Ultimate outside of Tenyi anyways. So this card's really, really, really good to play in the deck because sometime your opponent's gonna hit this with a Twin Twister or something, or a copy of like I don't know. They're going to hit it with something and destroy it. Or a copy of maybe Dragoons, and then you just drop Blue Eyes Ultimate, and they're like, oh, I messed up. And it's just really good. So that's it for the main deck, guys. Let's get into the extra deck. So for the extra deck, we're going to be playing a single copy of Draco Masters of the Tenyi. So Draco Masters of the Tenyi, I did get a rarity bump for this card because it did come out of the Megatins. This card cannot be destroyed by the effects of effect monsters, can't be destroyed by battle by effect monsters, and if you control no other effect monsters, you can destroy effect monsters your opponent controls up to the number of non-effect monsters you control and or in your graveyard, which is really good. It just can board wipe your opponent if you have 3 monks in your grave or on your side of the field. I mean, you have plenty of cards in your deck that have non-effect monsters. I mean, I think you have like 5 in the extra deck that are vanillas. We play a single copy of the Link 4 Tenyi monster. This card's pretty good in the deck too. This card's like really, really, really like getting to be a really good Link 4 for me. Like, I really like this card. While you control a face-up non-effect monster, monsters your opponent controls cannot target effect monsters for attacks, and then also your opponent cannot target effect monsters on the field with card effects. And then quick effect, you can target one effect monster on the field. that your opponent controls, and then you special summon a Tenyi Spirit token to your side of the field with the same attack and defense as that target monster and level. Or it's a level 4, which is pretty good just to be able to get that particular monster and get a token on your side of the field. It reminds me a lot of Dragon Necro Nethersoul, which is just a really good card overall in zombie decks. Play a single copy of Berserker of the Tenyi, which has the effect of absolutely nothing. This card is just a good beat stick of 3k. I mean, that's all it is, and it's a really good card that you end on to be able to just resolve your copy of Flawless Perfection and have a big 3k beat stick on your side of the field. I play 2 copies of Shaman. Shaman lets you discard a card, and then you get to target a worm in your graveyard and special summon it. And also for the rest of the turn, you cannot activate monster effects or special summon anything but Tenyi monsters, which is not that big a deal. And when an attack is declared involving your face-up non-effect monster, you can target one card your opponent controls and destroy it, which is pretty good just to be able to get you a Tenyi monster on your side of the field and be able to pop multiple cards. We play 3 copies of Monk. Monk is really good in the deck too because Monk is basically the starter of the deck. You special summon any of your Tenyis from your deck, or from your hand, and then you just summon this and go off because you have a non-effect monster. We play a single copy of Access Code Talker. You can play Borreload, you can play Borrelsword, whatever you want to play, Appaloosa, something budget, anything that you want to play in this position. Avermax. Avermax is like $3 now. I mean, you can play anything you want in this position. It's really up to you. 1 copy of Land, which again is a vanilla monster. The only reason I play this is so I can summon it off my copy of Mare, which you have to keep in mind. If you summon the Shaman, you can't special summon any Cyverse monsters. You have to summon only worm monsters, so that's something to keep in mind. Link Spider, same thing. You summon it off your copy of your Mare tokens just so you can get different monsters on your side of the field with different attributes to send to the graveyard for your copy of Access Code Talker. Draco Berserker of the Tenyi is really good in the deck because it is the best synchro monster for this entire deck, because if it destroys a monster by battle, and gains attack equal to that destroy monster's original attack. If your opponent activates an effect, you can quick effect banish it. You just banish whatever they activate. I mean, it doesn't negate it, but it banishes it. We play a single copy of Borreload Savage, which just became budget. It's like $11 now. What this card does is if you synchro summon this card, you attach a link monster as a equip spell to this thing, and it gets Boral counters depending on the link arrows, and it gains half the attack of the monster equipped to it, and it can negate the card once per turn. Yazi's really good in this deck because it lets you, when you go into this card, you pop itself, and then when you pop itself, then you get special summon a worm monster from your deck, which is always going to be Mare, because then you can trigger to Mare, go for your copy of Land and Link Spider, and then link the Land Link Spider and your copy, Land Link Spider and the Mare away to summon your access code, and then go after your opponent, because that gets you the 4 materials that you need, because you get 3 Mare tokens, which is pretty good. And it also has the ability that it can pop a card on your opponent's side of the field as well, so you basically pop a card on your field, pop a card on your opponent's field, and then get the effect off. We then play a single copy of Blue Eyes Ultimate, which you guys already know about. This card's really good with the Flawless Perfection of the Tenyi, and it really works out with your copy of Fist of the Unrivaled Tenyi, because it just negates stuff, and if it gets popped, then you get to summon this card for free. So, that's it for the deck, guys. I hope you did enjoy it. It's a really budget deck now. I mean, it is insanely budget. I mean, I am genuinely amazed at the amount that this deck has actually dropped. You can change out the impermanence to make it even more budget if you want to. You can change the permanence out, play Chalice. You can change out the copies of Borreload Savage, which I don't know why you would. It's $10. But there's a couple of cards in this deck that you can change out to make it really budget. And it's really awesome that you can. So that's it for the deck, guys. I hope you don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell there so you can become part of the notification squad, and definitely check out the Patreon because it super helps out the channel when you guys do. And we'll see you guys in the next video. See you later, guys.